Gene Fruth, welcome to the Bookshelf Conversations.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So this is your second book, and it is a massive book. I'll see if I can pick it up here. It's so heavy. Uh, Grassroots Baseball, Route 66. And you did another book in this format before Grassroots Baseball, Where Legends Begin. Uh, would you say this is a follow-up to that, or just a total standalone, or how would you describe that?
It is a follow-up. Grassroots baseball, where legends begin, was never, I didn't set out to create a book. It just kind of happened after the fact. I was shooting major league game and professional baseball, and I always took time to shoot the amateur game because that's where my love is, the grassroots game. So if I was in Japan shooting the World Baseball Classic, I would find a Little League game in Tokyo. Or if I was in the Dominican Republic shooting Winter League, I'd wander to San Pedro de Macorís and look for pickup game on the street. And it was just a collection of images for years that it was just a personal project. And when I started shooting for the Baseball Hall of Fame as their traveling photographer, I connected with Hall of Famers, and I thought, how great hearing their stories of what it was like in their younger years playing baseball where they grew up. That's where I came up with the concept of tying all these amateur baseball of every level to regions where these Hall of Famers and legends grew up. And that's how the first book came about. After that book, I wanted to grow grassroots baseball into something more, into a not-for-profit and giving back. And I'm at a point in my life where giving back is important to me, and surrounding my work with purpose. So I partnered with Jeff Idelson, who was retiring from the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we grew grassroots baseball into a not-for-profit, giving back at the youngest level of the game and celebrating the game. And we did clinics, and we decided to start off along Route 66. So thus the follow-up book. So spent 3 years along Route 66 documenting the game, everything from T-ball, minor league ball, old guys playing vintage baseball, with those rules, and baseball on pueblos. And but the second book, Route 66, was always meant to be a book. So I knew that was one of the goals of the project.
Your travels reminds me, my family took a cruise to Alaska, and we got off in one of the cities there, and just happened to chance upon a group of young people playing a pickup game in the middle of a field someplace. And I'm always like, whenever I see a baseball field with people on it, I have to stop and see what's going on. Just as an example, in your Route 66 book, you have people writing chapters, writing introductions to chapters. Jem Tome writes about Illinois, Ryan Howard about Missouri, Adam LaRoche about Kansas, et cetera, et cetera. Johnny Bench, Oklahoma, and Bench also wrote for grassroots baseball. How do you engage these people to participate?
The first book helped a lot, of course, with the second book, just having some scoreboard and how well that turned out. But I when I reached out to Hall of Famers the first time, we just got such a nice response of people, most of them wanting to tell their stories of their younger years. The first guy I asked was Ricky Henderson for the first book, and he immediately launched into a story of playing early years of baseball in Oakland. And he told me he wanted to be a football player. His mother wanted him to be a baseball player. And the coach would pick him up, the baseball coach, and have a hot chocolate and a glazed donut waiting in the back seat. And that's how he chose baseball over football. And it's just fun stories and stories of their early years, and a lot of, tie into their father, their mother, and the connecting of generations and how baseball does that. And so the early years and the stories were just so natural for these guys to tell, and they wanted to tell them, and they supporting the amateur game is a big deal for so many of them. And that's why Johnny Bench participated in the second one as well. He has, big ties to Bangor, Oklahoma, and to where he started, where he began, a town of 600 people. To make it to the major leagues in a town like that is a big deal. And never mind making it to the Baseball Hall of Fame. You know, the less than 1% make it there out of all the major leaguers. So the young stories and the early stories, I think everybody was happy to tell, and we're getting great support with our not-for-profit, with grassroots. I think that people like what we're doing, and we have a lot of people chipping in and helping and asking how they can help. So we're off to a nice start.
What kind of, being practical for a minute, what kind of permissions do you have to shoot a lot of these things? Like you mentioned, you're shooting like T-ball players, you're shooting senior leagues. How do you go about what's involved in actually the groundwork for doing that?
It's a lot of planning and scheduling. You know, I'd like to say, oh, I just show up to a town and wander around and all this happens, but it certainly doesn't. It's a lot of phone calls. Little League International helps, is a big partner of ours, tremendous supporter of ours, and we are of them. So we'll get a lot of connections from them, and they'll connect us to the head of the league in whatever town or city we're going to. And so we might start with Little League, or we might start with a high school, and whatever our connection is. And from there, it grows. And then we get other connections through that. And it's a lot of participation and a lot of people. But when we show up at a game and I'm shooting a Little League game or a T-ball game or a high school game, I always share the photos too, because, you know, people like to have them, and that's kind of part of it. And I like sharing them. It's a big memory for them. You know, we don't know what's going to be at the book at this point. You know, when you're shooting, you just say, I have no idea what the publisher will choose or the designer is going to choose. But, you know, they get the photos right away. And, you know, and then we see them down the road a few years later, and, you know, maybe their kid ends up in the book. And we have a lot of connections, and we follow up, you know, and it's fun to do that as well, and go back to the city and do a book signing and see the kid 3 years later who was in your book. And so that makes it, yeah, enjoyable and rewarding.
That's nice. I don't think people fully appreciate, you know, they see a book of photographs and figure, you know, you sit there, you take pictures, but there's a lot of planning, a lot of processing. I'm imagining you're using digital equipment.
Oh, absolutely, all
So,
digital.
so, uh, yeah, I like to uh, you in your book, you refer to Neil Leifer, who's an old time photographer who got his start when he was a teenager, I believe, with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And in those days, of course, they didn't have digital, so you had to haul around uh, heavy duty equipment with you, and then take the time and expense of developing that film. And you don't have the luxury that modern equipment allows you to sit with your finger on the shutter and just take picture after picture after picture in bursts. Uh, for a book like this, there are hundreds of photos in here. How many photos do you take to whittle
Yeah,
down to these hundreds?
I mean, many more. I mean, obviously, even one shoot, one game might be 1,000 to 2,000 photos. Um, and you know, at the end of the day, after 3 years of all that shooting and thousands of images, um, you have 250 photos. So most of them end up on the cutting room floor, because it's not just about putting photos on a page to make a book. You know, you have to tell a story. There's 8 states that Route 66 run through, and though baseball is played the same everywhere around the world, it looks different in different places. And that's my job, is to show the cultural, the geography, the topography. Baseball looks different in downtown Chicago than it does in Baxter Springs, Kansas, looks different in desert Arizona along Route 66 compared to the shores of Santa Monica. And that's what I'm interested in, is showing the culture and showing the difference and showing what baseball looks like in these towns. And of course, with Route 66 tying it into the Americana makes it that much more fun.
And one of the things I enjoyed were we're seeing those non-baseball photos, the photos of the diners, the photos of the gas stations, of the stores on the street at twilight or at dawn. Well, that is one thing I noticed, especially in this latest book. The time of day that you seem to take the pictures seems to be later. It seems to be dusk almost. I don't know if that's the right designation.
Yeah.
But is that something you deliberately look for? Is there something special about that time?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about the magic hour, as I'm sure your daughter would call it as well, as a photographer. With grassroots baseball, I get to choose when I shoot. When I shoot Major League Baseball, the game starts at 7:15. Well, that's it. The game starts at 7:15. I don't get to say to the Giants, hey, can we move that up to 4 o'clock? The light show would be a lot prettier. But with grassroots baseball, I can control the timing to a certain point. I mean, if there's an important game I want to be at, that's one thing, but I always try to get that magic hour. And then with all the Americana, I shot everything at sunrise and at sunset. So I had different options and different angles, and then decide what's pretty. And if it's not a pretty day, I wait and, do it the next day, because that's, what it's got to be about. The light is important. And so chasing the light is forever part of the quest of making pretty pictures, and it makes all the difference.
For a book such as this, you say there are thousands and thousands of pictures. Are those totally your decision as to what ends up in the book?
No, it's not. I mean, and it shouldn't be, because you get very tied into stories and emotionally, like it really requires an outside eye, I think, at least for me, as photographers at times make lousy editors. We know what a good picture is, but you tend to get emotionally connected at times, which you really can't. But a designer and brings a lot to what a good book is really about, because it's about scale and changing up scale, and it's about colors, and it's about what goes on a page, and it's also storytelling. So you have to make your point, and whatever the best one, that wins, and it has to look different. You can't have the same picture in one chapter as the other. So it's each page, as you turn it, should be a surprise and not repetitious. So it really does require that kind of eye, and it makes, you get a good designer, it makes all the difference in really the storytelling. And when you do that, at the end of the day, you have a book where you're proud of every photo that's in it, because it's been edited and edited. As a matter of fact, Neil Leifer did early rounds of the editing for the Route 66 book for me. He's a very good editor. He's been doing it a long time and has a lot of books out there. So it was really terrific. All the double trucks in the book, I credit him with that, because my first book didn't have double trucks, and he's a big believer in double trucks, and it
I'm
really
sorry, could
made
you, what is a double truck?
a double truck is the photo goes across both pages, and you'll see that is I have no double trucks in the first book. And it was the first thing that Neil said to me was, hey, where are the double trucks? I want to see them in this one. And he could even point out the pictures as he went through, saying this would make a fabulous double truck. And he was right, and we put it on the page. And so I would sit with Neil, and then I'd go back to the designer and say, how about this? How about this? And it really just made it so much better. So I have a lot to thank Neil for on that one.
From a production standpoint, where does the designer come from? Is that somebody that the publisher supplies? It's somebody you pick? How does that work?
It was somebody that I picked. The publisher can provide the designer as well. The first book, both books were designed by different people. The first book was through a recommendation, a friend of mine, and he's out of London. And it was a fun process, and he did an absolutely terrific job. The second one was a recommendation from Neil. So again, Neil had a lot of influence, and it's fun to see the difference. The first guy had no baseball knowledge, which I didn't mind, because he had
That's
artistic,
interesting.
yeah.
That's
And so
interesting. An outsider deciding, like, it's an interesting, because it comes with a really fresh pair of eyes.
certainly, yeah. And it was just terrific the way he could see things, and how he saw what a picture was. And it made the storytelling much better, because he could see the stories. The baseball didn't matter to him as much. So I had Steve Fine also, who was the director of photography for Sports Illustrated for many years, and he's a dear friend. He helped with both books. And of course, he knows baseball and every sport inside and out. So though the designer didn't have the baseball knowledge in the first one, Steve Fine had enough for everyone. So the combination, and he laid out the magazine, Sports Illustrated magazine, for many years. So magazine's different than a book, of course, but the knowledge was just invaluable.
What about the captions?
So captions, just kept them simple and fun for the most part, except for ones that, needed a little bit more of a story to tell. But I had some help with the captions, and baseball writer Steve Wolf, who helped with both books, was a big help with captions. And so it was a combination. Steve Fine helped with captions, Jeff Idelson helped with captions. So, and of course, I'm writing captions all the way through because I archive everything, but the captions that you use for archives are certainly different than you want for a book, because you're telling a story in a book. So the captions are different.
That's an interesting idea. You're taking the picture and you're writing the caption. What kind of record keeping do you do? Because you're busy taking the pictures. I don't imagine you're writing the stories or the captions, or are you writing notes as you're taking the pictures, or do you not have time for that while you're working that aspect of it?
I mean, I keep notes, obviously the game, I have all the game information, who it was played against, key people in there. If I need to name somebody, my cameras have the capability of voice tagging, so I can actually attach a name when I need to, or play. I shot the Detroit Tigers playing the San Francisco Giants last night. And, if somebody hit a home run, I would tag it, as it happened, just to find it easily and then to remember the play without having to go back to the box score. But everything has to be tagged and archived eventually. So, all the photos that I'm taking that are not out of focus, that's a photo that I want to keep, have to be tagged and archived and captioned eventually. Otherwise, they're not searchable. So it's a whole job, and I do it in batches. But for all my games, major league games and the grassroots games, everything is captioned, and then it goes up on a kind of a cloud, a website. I use a company called Photo Shelter, and I'm able to search with keywords. And if I need a photo of Miguel Cabrera, I could put his name in, and every photo I've ever taken of Miguel Cabrera will pop up, and I have it at my fingertips. So it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, good information in, good, it's the same. So you got to do a good job with your archiving. The best is Brad Mangin. I know you talked to him many years ago. He taught me what good archiving is, and he's very organized with his images. I'm not as good as Brad, but I learned from him.
Brad had a very interesting book that he took pictures on for Instagram, and he collected all of those. And those are in a different format, of course, than taking regular photos. Looking at a lot of these pictures, I'm thinking about where you are physically positioned in order to get the shot. And it reminds me of many years ago, like when Neil was doing his work, the photographers were actually on the field in foul territory, sometimes dangerously close to the action. And you marvel that I've never heard a story, I'm sure it happened, of photographers getting nailed by line drive foul balls or other dangers of there. What kind of positioning do you take when you take some of these pictures?
Well, if I could have been one of those photographers on the field, I would have taken my chances and did that, getting that play of Jackie Robinson sliding into home with Yogi Berra. I wish that was me on the field. I'm glad I'm not that old, but with the grassroots game and even minor league fields, I have a lot of leeway. You can't get in the way of play, so you're always paying attention. But mixing up the angles is really important. If you're in the same position, same old, you're going to get the same old result. So, changing positions, and it's something I teach in photography. You really the angle makes a big difference. And so where can you find an interesting angle that may be seeing it in a different way? You know, the outfield of Dodger Stadium, I got to shoot there like during playoffs, and it's a whole new perspective seeing the game from these different angles. And even shooting the up and you shoot down, well, it cleans up your backgrounds and you have a different looking picture. And I'm a big fan of shooting low, and the cameras now, you talk about the technology being so wonderful. For me, you know, you have a camera like that, it does so much of the job of the technical side that you're able to frame and compose and really create something. The screens come out in the back, so you can put the camera on the ground and still focus, and you get this low angle, making the athlete look so heroic. And so that's a terrific angle as well. So it's really mixing it up, seeing where you can go, getting a different perspective. Sometimes I'll shoot right in the dugout if I have permission to. For the younger kids, I will shoot on the field and lay on the field, and they ignore me after a while, you know, like, who's this person laying in the dirt? But it does make for more interesting pictures and storytelling.
You're talking about angles makes me think of Ozzie Sweet, who I remember famously took during spring training. He would take pictures of the Yankees shooting up at them against the blue skies with the palm trees in the background, making like people like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, like you say, even more heroic than they were. Do you have a favorite venue?
Huh. Um, I mean, I love the classic ballparks that the seats are close to the, you know, to the field where you're really in it, like Wrigley and um, but I mean, and I also like right here in San Francisco, the San Francisco Giants have a beautiful ballpark. Baltimore, Pittsburgh with the bridges, you know, the ballparks where you really know it's a sense of place and you know where you are. So I have a lot of favorites, you know, for different reasons. But I would say the old classic one's Dodger Stadium, because it screams LA, you know, the colors of the seats and the palm trees and how they were able, even though they're renovating, they maintain and keep the history. To do such a great job at making sure that Dodger Stadium doesn't get lost in the renovations. Janet Marie Smith, the architect, she does a great job at, she did Red Sox as well. And so ballparks like Fenway and Wrigley, I'd say, and Dodger Stadium are my favorites.
Aside from Fenway and Wrigley, I believe the Dodgers ballpark is one of the oldest still being used at this point. What about for the book? Did you have was there one town, one stop along the way
Oh,
that really
I'm sorry,
stands
yeah, I
out?
misunderstood. Um, well, I mean, there was just I mean, really each chapter was so different and each venue was so different. I mean, I'd say New Mexico was really interesting to me because I never shot on a pueblo. So it was a Native American reservation, and just seeing that baseball, and it was an all dirt field, and these adobe, you know, houses that they're living in, like right behind the field. And that was really interesting to me. And just some of the older ballparks being, you know, being there, and you know, they're all different for different reasons. So I guess I don't have one. Texas made a lot of great pictures. There seemed to be a lot of dirt flying, and dirt makes great pictures. You know, when you have this, I'm not a big fan of artificial turf. It just doesn't, it's not the same when you're running, sliding into home. So so Texas was great in that way. It was made a lot of great pictures. So each venue was different. But Texas and New Mexico, I think, made a lot of great pictures.
I'm seeing a lot of pictures on your wall there. Are those your pictures?
No, I wish they were. Right behind me is Osvaldo Salas. He was a photographer, Cuban photographer who went back and forth between Havana before the revolution and shot a lot of baseball in New York. And now all these these images are at the Baseball Hall of Fame. So I was a big collector of Cuban photographers and photographers during the revolution. And so, yeah, my collection grew over the years, and you know, I am a big fan of that era of baseball. So like you say, the Ozzie suite with the beautiful sky. Well, Osvaldo Salas has those kind of portraits that are pretty amazing. So I'm happy I get to have some of them.
An elementary question I should have asked early on. How did you get interested in this? How did you get interested in photography and then this aspect of photography?
Photography, I was always interested in. I love the idea of the dark room, and my high school had a dark room, and I thought printing in the dark room would be something I'd like to do as a profession. This was as a very young person. And then I went off in a different industry, just trying to make money, but I always kept photography as a hobby and in the back of my mind, and then decided to make the switch into being a portrait photographer and turned my career into a full-time career of photography in portraiture in Northern California. And I worked with two women, and I printed all their work in their darkroom in exchange for going out on shoots with them and learning from them. So they were my first two mentors. And eventually we became partners. And then sadly, the darkroom was no more. We switched to digital. One of them went kicking and screaming. She did not want to switch, but it was just inevitable that you had to do it. And then I started shooting. I was coaching rookie ball. My son was 5 years old and playing rookie ball. And Little League called me and asked if I'd coach Little League. And I said, oh, you don't want me. I'm just doing it because nobody volunteered. But they wanted women coaches. So they said they would train me if I would do it. And I said, sure. And then I stayed in Little League and started sending photos to the local paper. And they hired me, and they had a group of 5 newspapers. And I started shooting high school sports, youth sports, and college sports, every sport, sports that I'd never shot before, going to, my first football, Friday Night Lights game. And I absolutely loved it. I wasn't very good at it. Shooting baseball, I understood. Football, I thought I understood, but I needed a lot of help with football. And I ended up connecting with Michael Zagaris, the 49ers photographer. And then I really learned how to shoot football. And he was also the Oakland A's photographer. And I got to assist him and go on shoots with him. And that's how I was able to move up to the major leagues and the pros, was shooting in the Bay Area, San Francisco Giants, 49ers, and the Oakland Athletics. So it was Michael Zagaris was a big part of my career and propelling me to that next level.
And judging by the outcome with the results of these books, it was a good career choice. We've been talking with Jean Fruth, rhymes with truth, author of Grassroots Baseball and Grassroots Baseball Route 66, then Grassroots Baseball, Where Legends Begin. Jean, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you.